All right, thanks everyone for joining us today on KRTD News. We got a couple of great stories for you today. Let's go ahead with our first story. So the Biden administration is investigating a legal leak of Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, and Warren Buffett's tax information. Now, there's a reason for this. The U.S. super rich, they pay almost no income taxes. And according to ProPublica, it is seen that the tax returns of some of the world's richest people. So they're alleging that Jeff Bezos paid no tax in 2007 and 2011, while Musk paid nothing in 2018. No.
Yeah.
Now the FBI and the tax authorities are investigating. Now, do I think anything's really going to come of this from the Biden administration? Not really. I mean, maybe they'll be slapped with a fine at best. But these are some of his campaign donors. Don't forget. It's very likely that these men have donated to his campaign when he ran for president. It's possible some of them donated while he was running. I don't know if Amazon was around when he was senator in Delaware. That was a long time ago, I was gonna say, but might have been. So these could be some of his campaign donors. I don't think he's gonna do anything really to hurt them, except maybe slap them with a small fine. What do you think?
Well, if you read the next line, where a White House spokeswoman called the leak illegal, and the FBI and tax authorities are investigating, they're actually only investigating how this information got out to the public, not how it was that Bezos, Musk, and Buffett paid virtually nothing in income tax.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, so I mean, it takes a minute for this all to sink in. They're not investigating the tax information, and they're not even saying anything about the tax information. Because you're right, they're protecting the Biden administration, and others are protecting these wealthy men amongst the wealthiest in the world. But they are going after the person who leaked the information, and it's that tells you everything you need to know about how this is being handled. And I mean, if any one of us paid no taxes, the IRS would be at our doors.
Mm-hmm.
There would be investigations. There would be the fines possible. I mean, I don't know. There are people who are war resistors who don't pay taxes, but they have to do it in a very specific, systematic way so that they don't get into trouble. These guys followed whatever tax loopholes there are and wound up paying nothing. And now the White House wants to know, or has asked the FBI and tax authorities to investigate the leak.
Look. Okay, great. Investigate the leak. How did this get leaked? But while you're investigating the leak, maybe you should investigate the information that the leak has provided you with.
That would be nice. I do believe Jeff Bezos just recently asked the Congress for, I think, $1 billion for some kind of missile to launch into outer space, right? And then he turned around and spent $1 billion on something else. This is what I heard. So
that's ridiculous.
Congress is giving away our tax money to somebody who has billions, who will soon become a trillionaire, and who paid no taxes in at least 2 years out of the last 15. Something wrong with that picture, right?
Mm-hmm. Although I am more than happy to use my tax money to launch Jeff Bezos into space.
He'll come back down though, Shane. What goes up must come down.
That's the only downside there. That's the only downside. But I just want to press the button. I want to be there and I want to press the button so that I could just send him away.
I don't know. And Elon Musk is another one who uses
another one, definitely.
Uses his millions or billions rather to make proclamations about how the United States can overthrow the governments of any South American, Latin American country that the United
Just
States
because we could
chooses.
doesn't mean we should.
No, absolutely. I agree with you 3000% on that, Shane.
And the other thing is, people don't realize, all these people advocating for war don't realize, once you've actually finished the war doesn't actually end. You stay there for the next 30, 40 years.
True. I mean, these are endless wars, never
Like
ending
I
wars.
remember seeing a guy, I think it was on OANN, saying, "Oh well, the war in Iraq only took 10 minutes."
Oh, yeah?
He said that, and then I'm like, maybe it took a day or whatever to conquer Iraq. In theory, our military superior, but once that was over, we never left.
Are we talking about the 2003 invasion here?
That's what he said. It took 10 minutes.
Well, it's now, that was 2003, March 19th, 2003. It's June 11th, 2021. That's about 18 years and we're still there. So you're absolutely right, Shane. And then Afghanistan, we invaded on October 7th, 2001. And we may or may not get out of there by September 11th, 2021. 20 years later. Talking about tax money. If we instituted a wealth tax on the incomes of these three, even if it was just, say, 1% or a little less than 1%, we could probably raise enough money to fund, well, instead of, I don't believe in these wars at all, but the amount of money that would be generated by that would be enough to cover the expenses, whether they be of wars or education or healthcare,
Pretty
you
much
name
anything,
it.
yes. Now,
Name it.
my thing here is there was a proposed bill by Elizabeth Warren 2 months ago or 1 month ago for a wealth tax. She hasn't fought for it at all. She put it on the floor. I think she was told she needed to get a Republican to support it in order to bring it up for a vote. And then she just said, okay, never mind. Did I say wealth tax? I meant never mind.
I meant never mind. I mean, we're getting a lot of that from this current administration, aren't we? We're getting, oh yes, we will eliminate about $1 billion worth of student debt. We'll forgive about $1 billion worth of student debt, 1 billion out of 1 trillion, and then learn just a couple of days ago, oh no, we're not going to do that. We're going to take that off the table. We're going to push for an increase in the minimum wage. We're going to do these things. They sounded good when he was running for president, but I guess, the reality is setting in and he doesn't want, his donors don't want him to do it.
Exactly. And just because, now viewers to understand, just because I'm calling out Elizabeth Warren for not doing it doesn't mean I wasn't in favor of the bills she proposed. It just means that she didn't fight for it. And as she said herself, 10 years ago, if you don't fight for it, the chances are zero.
Yeah. I mean, the income inequality in this country has not been in good shape for a while, but because of the COVID-19 pandemic and the lockdowns in many states and the loss of jobs and the loss of health insurance, the profits of some of these guys, Jeff Bezos in particular, are absolutely obscene, and they just, you can see this, the income inequality like the palm of your hand, and it should, people should be angry, jumping up and down with anger about how, look, he pays almost no income tax, super rich, and what's happening is the leak of this information is being investigated, not how Jeff Bezos wound up being poised to be the world's first trillionaire during the pandemic, making millions every day. But we're not going to investigate how he wound up not paying any taxes.
But what you just don't understand is they own the Senate.
Yeah.
Even if there's a couple senators who don't take money, to my knowledge, I believe it's the few so-called progressives in the Senate don't take any money from these people. That's 11 senators. Now we have 100 senators in the Senate.
Hmm.
So if you subtract 11 from 100,
Yes.
you get 89 senators.
Yes.
And there are 89 senators at least who are taking money from these people.
Well, and if you look at it even more broadly, Shane, there are 400. Oh gosh,
35 Congress people.
thank you. I had a momentary lock in my brain. Plus 100 senators, that's 535 representatives and senators. Think about all the money that's poured into their campaigns. Think about all the money that's
Let's be fair
spent.
here.
And
Let's
there's
be fair.
only 535 people here. Each one is can take advantage of a pretty penny. Yeah, go ahead, Shane. Sorry.
Let's be fair here. Let's say there are 45 people not taking money from the corporations. Let's say there are 45 who are not taking money from these people. Let's be generous and we'll say there are 45. That's still 490 people in this, outnumbering the people who don't take the money. So they don't get to make that decision. People who take the money absolutely make that decision because they outnumber them by the million, I was gonna say by the millions, by the hundreds.
Well, millions of dollars. Let's go there.
Mm-hmm.
Not millions of people, but millions of dollars. And those you would think that the millions of people would speak louder than the millions of dollars, I mean, millions of voters, but that's not the case.
Well, it's because even the progressives are just politicians.
Mm-hmm. Yes, well,
it's unfortunate.
We've talked about that word progressive before.
Absolutely.
And I all of our discussions and other discussions I've had about that word have caused me not to use it anymore because it doesn't really mean anything. I guess you could say so-called progressives, or those who look like they might be independent from some of these big dollars, but at the end of the day, that independence it's tenuous. It's still a very strong connection. So what does it really mean?
Exactly. Now let's go ahead on to our next story. We're already a little bit over. Let's go ahead to the next slide. The Keystone XL pipeline has been terminated. Where have I heard this before?
Yeah.
Where have I heard this before? I wonder. Let's go to the next slide. So let's go through the timeline, everybody. So this is not the entire timeline. We'll put the full timeline in the description for all of you to take a look at. But we picked out a few key pieces of the timeline. So January 29th, 2015, the U.S. Senate approves a bill to build the Keystone XL pipeline. But the White House says Obama would veto it. Okay. November 6th, 2015. The Obama administration rejects TransCanada's application to build the Keystone XL pipeline. January 24th, 2017, Trump signs an executive order that he says approves the Keystone XL. April 7th, 2020, construction begins. January 20th, 2021, Biden revokes the Keystone XL's presidential permit on his first day in office. June 9th, 2021, TC Energy announces the termination of the project. Okay. Where's the problem here? This is 5 different scenarios or 6, whatever it is. And on, off, on, off, on, off. I don't understand. Are we building it? Are we not building it? What's happening here? My other problem with this pipeline is if we can go to the next graphic. So this is where it goes through. The Keystone Pipeline path cuts across Native American land. So the blue is the existing pipeline. This is what we've already built. Now, the red is where it's proposed to be built, just so everybody understands what we're looking at here. And if we're really done with it this time, if we're actually done with the pipeline, we need to dismantle it, and we need to return the land to the Native Americans and I actually think that the our president might owe them a public apology for trying to for our government taking their land. In addition,
Well, and if you look at the history of this and go back to Standing Rock and go back to some of the protests that took place in the dead of winter over the construction of this, um, there are apologies owed there too. The way that the authorities dealt with opposition to this proposal. So this is this. Uh, there's a lot to answer for, and as you said, Shane, the on again, off again, on again, off again nature of it. TC, they're announcing that the plan is dead and the project is over for now. Oh, and you see, I didn't even mean to say for now, it just came out of my mouth that way. The project is over for now.
well, the thing is, as we saw, Barack Obama did, to his credit, not stop the pipeline. But what he didn't count on was what he forgot was the president after him could just pick up where he left off.
Yeah,
Or he didn't care.
No, and that's what happened. I mean, if you look at the bigger picture on this too, one of the things that is a real concern to many people throughout this country, and rightfully so, is the climate crisis that we're facing. And one of the things that's a part of addressing this climate crisis is not permitting any further pipelines, not allowing any further pipelines to be built, dismantling existing ones and moving us off fossil fuels altogether. So this is this on again, off again, this treatment of Native Americans and Native American land. It's all part of something that needs to stop.
Wait, don't forget. Let's go back to Jeff Bezos for a second. He has this little climate pledge by 2055 or by 2060 or whatever it was, or 2050 or 2045, whatever one of those years it was, we should be off of fossil fuels. That's what he thinks.
Is that which year did he say? Because I know Biden is saying 2050. And here in New Jersey, Governor Murphy is saying the same thing. And the Council on Climate Change has been saying that we have maybe 7 or 8 more years, which would take us to even before 2030.
Okay, let's take the climate pledge. Amazon is committed to building a sustainable business for our customers and the planet. In 2019, Amazon co-founded the climate pledge, a commitment to be net zero carbon across our business, only their business.
Okay.
By 2040, 10 years ahead of the Paris Agreement.
Yeah, but at least 10 years too late and it's only for them. It's not for the country as a whole.
With your little lobbying, why can't you lobby the senators to support your little climate pledge by 2030 maybe, or 2035 or whatever it is?
If the will existed to get us off of fossil fuels as soon as possible, I mean, this is what I hear from youth constantly. We don't have the time. We don't have the time to wait for this. We need to get off of fossil fuels right now. And we need to take a pledge to get this done by 2030, not by 2040, not by 2050, but even before 2030 if we can. And if the political will existed, hey, you were talking about it, Shane, if all but 49 people in the Congress were getting big money from these wealthy people, and these wealthy people said, we don't have time, let's stop now. There would be, okay, you gave me money, I got to do what you asked me to do. Not that I'm advocating for that. I'm not. But
I'm not either, but that, unfortunately, our system works now. Yeah. That's definitely how our system works, which is unfortunate. So here's an interesting proposal. I don't remember who had proposed this to me, but this is something another interesting to look at. This is from this is what would be called market socialism, where you could have the government possess the gas industry and the oil
Mhm.
industry and all of that, and they could manage the decline. So the gas stations wouldn't close; they would be owned by the government, and they would manage the decline of the gas stations.
Mhm.
And in addition to that, you could somehow um, you could help people get more eco-friendly cars while you're managing that decline. Maybe that might take a little bit longer in 2030, but you can stop other things by 2030. Maybe not the cars is going to be a very difficult one, but the government should definitely manage the decline of the gas stations.
Yeah, and the cars, there are many that are being built now that are hybrid cars. We've been on the road to eliminating reliance on petroleum products
Problem
for
is,
cars.
not everybody can afford it.
No, but if we're gonna, because that's because that's marketplace driven. You're talking about market socialism. You could also talk about a public bank, and a public bank where various parts of the population um, have a stake in managing where the money goes. That could be workers, it could be indigenous, it could be immigrants, it could be
Hmm.
people who are currently unemployed. We want various sectors of the population to have the ability to manage where the money is going, where tax money is going, and not have it go into the hands of these House of Representatives and the members of the House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate, because we've already seen, how that gets skewed toward things that are in the billionaires, the super rich's interest.
Now,
So,
the other thing you can do is there's also ways to convert older cars to a different fuel, which you could do.
mhm.
I know how the Democrats and Republicans love their little tax credits. You could do that. You could, hey, here, we're going to give you a tax credit. We're going to give you all of your money back that you paid for this, plus 50% or 60% if you convert your car to this fuel instead of fossil fuels. And there's a way to do it.
You're sounding like you're advocating for a real Green New Deal, Shane. You're
Oh,
sounding this is making me think of Howie Hawkins and his Green New Deal and the idea, um, organizing our workplaces and organizing our society so that we can be economically sustainable and environmentally sustainable at the same time.
so
I don't know, Shane.
there's no reason. And everybody's like, oh, you're going to take away the old cars. You don't have to take away the old cars. You can convert them to a different kind of fuel. And that's not impossible.
Yes, but what you've got to do is you've got to make sure someone, whether it's a public bank, whether it's the workers inside the auto plants in Detroit and elsewhere, you've got to have worker control over what's going on, so that or community control over what's being produced and how it's being produced, so that we can move in this direction. Um, and it's not impossible. It's certainly not impossible. There are models of this kind of change all over the world. It's
There's
just,
you could take a 1984 car and you could convert it to take vegetable oil, to my knowledge, or fry oil or something to that knowledge, rather than gasoline. It's not That's something that can be done.
yes, well, all I'm saying is that while the technologies are there and it is possible, the only way it's going to happen is if the political dynamic in this country changes. And that's what, I mean, it's imperative that we do that. It's imperative that the political dynamic change, because if it doesn't change, well, maybe we should take a look at the next, what's coming up next on our slides. I don't
Oh,
know.
absolutely. Let's take a look
Yeah.
at this.
Okay.
So there are low-flying DHS helicopter low-flying DHS helicopter showers pipeline protesters with debris. So
Mhm.
authorities said that the risky low-flying maneuver was used to warn demonstrators to disperse, but the reasoning doesn't hold up. Why are you warning me with a helicopter when I'm peacefully protesting? What is that? So here we have a pilot. I can't Stephen, and he says, or I think that's it. This is straight up illegal. FAA Air Regs Title 14, Section 91.119 specifically prohibits low-flying aircraft from being closer than 500 feet to any person, vessel, vehicle, or structure. Citizens can report this interaction to the FAA at their hotline.faa.gov. So they're illegally trying to disperse protesters in an illegal way.
And this is in Minnesota. This is for line 3, another pipeline that is being proposed. And I know on Earth Day, I participated in an action here in New Jersey in solidarity with the Pipeline 3 protesters in Minnesota. And I know some of my colleagues in New Jersey traveled to Minnesota for 3 days of solidarity. And I would assume that this happened as part of that the helicopter antic illegal maneuver was also at about that time. This is from June 8th. So it was only a couple of days ago. And you know, if this is the other way we could answer that question about whether the Keystone pipeline project is actually dead now. Because I said for now, and we could also say it's announced as over, but we're gonna permit a pipeline in Minnesota instead. So what have you gained? They can't swap. We're well past the point when we can swap one for the other. You close it down and you deny the permit to this one. I think that's the argument that's being made.
Absolutely. And this will likely also go over indigenous land.
But yeah, and let's go back to your 1984 cars and, and find an alternative of fuel and build cars today that use an alternate fuel.
Exactly. The other thing is you can create government jobs in 2 different areas. Well, I would say in the one area, there is the science to convert the fuel. So you can create a government job, you create factories across the country where you bring in your old car. You set reasonable prices where people are not going to be paying an arm and a leg to get this done, where it's not going to be like $2,000, $5,000, $10,000, something the average person can actually afford.
Yes.
Where they can bring in their car and they can have it converted. Because there's going to be a lot of people, oh, I like my 1970 Mustang or whatever. Great. You can come here for $500, $200, you can have it converted into a reusable energy.
And
renewable.
At the same time, Shane, if we had a public bank, we could also invest more in public transit. We could also make it so that it's easier to get from point A to point B by bus or train, instead of having to wait for an hour and a half for the next train or the next bus.
Oh, absolutely.
And in certain areas of the city or of the state, get a lot of bus service or train service, and other areas get none. I mean,
I think one model to look at is New York City. New York City and New York State have some. Now it's not completely green yet. There's a plan to make that green soon. Like everything's being converted over and there's a timeline for that. But in New York, wherever you are, you can go by bus, you can go by train, and you can get anywhere you want to go within the entire state. Everything is connected. You don't have to worry. I can go I live in New York. If I want to go to another borough or whatever, I just hop on the bus. It's very easy. Now I'm gonna get Madam, you're in New Jersey. What does the transit look like there?
Well, there's a lot of discussion about it. New Jersey transit has been trying for a while to improve its service and, reconstructing some of its train stations and tracks. Um, but I know I used to work with someone who, if he if he drove, it would take 45 minutes to get from his home to our office.
Hmm.
If he took public transportation, it could take as long as 2 hours, um, because of the way that things that trains were scheduled. So the idea would be, uh, and he's coming from one suburb to another. Bloomfield is not exactly a suburb, but it's not Newark. It's just north of Newark. So there's a lot that can be improved, and it needs to be done. If it's We don't want new rail lines going through low income neighborhoods. I mean, like this, everything we're talking about, Shane, requires a holistic vision, right? You don't want to make it easier for somebody to go from the suburb into a city at the expense of the people in the city.
Well, of course not.
So we need to, as a society, look at the overall picture. And I know there are a lot of people who feel that New Jersey Transit just doesn't cover enough of the state in a way that is convenient for people. And if I understand, if you have a car and you can jump in the car when you're ready and arrive where you need to go 45 minutes later, and your other option is to wait an hour for a train, and then maybe you have to change trains, and then you finally get to your destination in this really fast-paced part of the country, that's just not going to cut it.
Exactly.
Um,
And the other thing is, what about the younger people? Like in New Jersey, I'm sure the younger people, teenagers, all those people, they don't have they can't take the bus around to go anywhere. And that's in New York, how everybody of that generation very easily, they're like, oh, I don't, oh, no, you don't have a car, no problem, I'll just take the bus.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of gaps. There's a lot of gaps in the service. There are problems with allocation of resources, how much money there is to improve the public transportation system. Um, I would need to look at it a lot more closely, and I will be looking at it a lot more closely in the next couple of months, just to see where the gaps are, to see how the money's being allocated, where the money is going, where it's not going. But generally speaking, though, public transportation does not get, or public transportation gets the short end of the funding. And New Jersey, if the if you don't own a car, navigating your way, as you've just been saying, Shane, if you don't own a car, navigating your way through different parts of New Jersey is really tough, really hard to do, and the
Definitely.
public
Well,
transit system needs to catch up.
absolutely. Let's go ahead and take a look at our next story. Eh, just to everybody watching, we're gonna go a little bit over today so we can finish our stories. If that's okay with you, Madeline, there's nobody coming live right after us.
Sure, I can do that. Now, let me explain this because, as you can see, it's in Spanish. But a
Mm,
couple of weeks ago, we had a special program here on KRTD Media about
mm-hmm.
the crisis in Colombia. It was a national strike that began on April 28th. It's continuing today, so it's more than a month in. And this first slide explains or shows how people feel about the direction of their country, how Colombians feel about
Mm-hmm.
the direction of their country. You can see it was just recently done. And if you want to get more or see more of these slides from this public opinion poll, you'd go to celag.org, celag.org. But you could see here, the green area represents 23.8% of the population in Colombia. That's the population. Well, 18.3% of Colombians has hope, esperanza. for the direction of the country. 5.5% has confidence in the direction of the country. So that's 23.8%. That's very, very small number. The whole section in the middle are those who are uncertain about the direction that the country is going in, not pleased, but uncertain. Then the 35.7% that you see in red includes those who are anxious, those who are angry. That's 19.4% plus 16.3%. That's a higher number than those who have hope and are confident. Then, of course, there's always that segment of the population that doesn't have an opinion or is indifferent to what's going on. But if you live in Colombia right now, this is what the breakdown is. It's a pretty solid condemnation or critique of the current government, the current Ivan Duque government in Colombia. We can move on to the next one.
Okay.
And this kind of reflects the same thing, but in a different kind of measure. The picture there is of the president, Ivan Duque. And we talked last time, or not last time, but we talked in that special program about the murders in the streets, the assassinations in the streets, the repression of the police forces, the paramilitaries, the confrontation with peaceful protesters. And you see right here, evaluation of his job performance. There's 23.3% who even, will say very good is 4.1%. That's a very small percentage. Good is 7.5%, and regular, okay, is I can't read it, but the total is 23.3% of the population polled here says that things are good in one way, shape, or form. The rest is 76.3% saying it's just regular, average bad, very bad, and bad. So the situation here, again, it's so tipped toward those who are not satisfied with the performance of their president. And this is, to me, knowing what I know about the Colombians going out into the streets and what's been going on, that's not surprising in that sense. But this is a sign to me of a very united country. And a lot of it has to do with the income distribution as well. Those who are happy are those who are the elites, and those who are not happy are those who are struggling before the pandemic, who don't have a job, have a low-paying job.
Now, what are the ones who are indifferent? You said there are some who are indifferent, correct?
Yeah, that was in the other slide. It's just, I think probably when people who are indifferent, you'd have a larger number here in this country of people who are indifferent because they're not really paying attention to politics. They don't really.
Well, it's likely people who would be indifferent would likely be like up. I don't know if Colombia would have like an upper middle class type citizen who's like, whatever. I'm not really worried. It's
possible. I think it also might include people who are so alienated from the political system that they fail to have an opinion now. But definitely. I think they've just turned off. I mean, I've encountered people in New Jersey in the last month or so. I was collecting signatures on a petition to run for governor, and I've had people say, I never vote. I've never voted. I don't have any intention to vote. Things are so bad here. There's a lot of people in the United States who are alienated from the system. Could you ever imagine, 76.3% of the people in this country agreeing on anything, let alone the direction of that the country's going in? Reef, there's one more slide. Yeah, and this confirms what we've just been talking about. Paro Nacional is a national strike. 74.5% of those polled approve of the national strike. This is now a month and a half after it began. And then 23.5% disapprove of it. And there's that small group who have no opinion really, who just don't know how to respond. But this again, a national strike since April 28th, and it still has just about 75% of the people in that country who are polled believing that it's the right thing to do and approving of what people in Colombia are doing.
It's crazy.
Yeah, and the last week, the international committee or commission, an Inter-Americana Commission for Human Rights, visited Colombia and over a 3-day period. And the report that they issued, along with Human Rights Watch, the report that they issued about the human rights violations, the assassinations, the disappearances, the brutality against women, the repression of students. The list goes on and on and on. And it's mostly, on the front lines in Colombia, it's mostly youth. And one of the articles that I read today, the youth are saying, hey, we've got nothing left to lose. We'll put ourselves on the front line in between ourselves and the police and take a stand, because our lives, we don't know we don't have that hope. Going back to esperanza and confianza, we don't have hope or confidence that this country is going to turn around. And we're going to stand out here and we're going to stand up for our rights until it does. And it may be a long time. It may be a long time because Yvonne Duque and the rest of them, they want to be part of the old boys network. They want to be part of the network with the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank and USAID, and use more of US money. And this is colonizers' money. It's colonizers' money that's been influencing and affecting Latin America for decades, for almost 70 years now, if not longer. So it's a real crisis. It's an ongoing crisis. And what's going to turn it around? It's only thing that's going to turn it around is some real systemic changes that create a better life for the majority of people who live in Colombia, whether they're indigenous, whether they're Afro-Colombiano, whether they are campesinos, whether they are unemployed, underemployed in the cities, whomever they are. Right now, they're not backing down. Nothing. They're not going back. See, and so there's an article I read. I'm not sure if it's if we're gonna see the actual headline here on the slide, but it was Colombia faces extermination or liberation, basically. They were caught in between, and which way it goes, I think a lot of that's going to depend on the international community. That's one reason why I keep bringing this up on this Friday night, second Friday, and separately, because we're all Americans, right? The United States considered to be North America, Norte Americanos, and then there's Central America and South America. We're all Americans, and these truly are our brothers and sisters who are standing up and taking one. I mean, they're standing up to the most intense repression that even Colombia has ever seen, and Colombia knows repression and civil war in ways that the United States maybe doesn't.
Definitely.
So these are this is an inspiration. Next slide. Oh, that was a quick jump. Do you want to say anything more about Colombia before we jump in here, Shane?
Definitely, there's a lot of. I think that everybody should really check out the special that we did. That'll give everybody a little bit more of an idea of what's going on in Colombia. I'm going to put the special.
Mhm.
Um, you can find the special if you go to the KRTD Media channel, YouTube channel, and you go to playlists. There's a playlist called One-Offs, and these are things that we've done one time. These are not something that's been repeat. So if you go into there, it's the first video, an hour and a half in the playlist, and I think everybody should definitely check that out. It gives a lot of information to what's happening.
Yeah, that's a good idea, Shane. And it was everyone who participated, except for me, token gringo here, or gringa. Everyone who participated is either Colombian living in the United States or Colombian living in Colombia. And
Well, me
so,
too. I participated. I'm not
oh,
Colombian.
sorry, we're both I was the token gringa and you're the token gringo. Right? And you had some really good questions to ask. So yes, I think that's a great suggestion. And there'll be at the end, after this little story here, we have a couple of action items that people can take, because we don't want to leave people with the impression that there's nothing that they can do to support the people of Colombia. We just had a primary in New Jersey on Tuesday, and just a couple of quick factoids about it. When we were talking about money earlier, Governor Murphy was running unopposed in the Democratic Party primary. He spent almost $7 million on advertising in an uncontested primary. Imagine what that $7 million could have done. He
Nearly 8
says,
million.
what's that?
I said nearly 8.
Yeah, yes, he still has some left in the bank of the 7.8 million. But yes, I mean, third parties, alternative parties, don't raise anywhere near that amount of money. But I'm also thinking about lead pipes in the city of Newark, replacing lead pipes so that people have clean drinking water. There's so many things, unemployment benefits. There's so much that could be used, but I didn't want to really spend a lot of time speaking about it. I just wanted to drop that fact. And the next one, the next one, I don't know if I have a separate slide, but
He was uncontested. Wait, wasn't there someone who
yes,
was going to run against him? I forgot.
yes, there actually were two people who were knocked off the ballot, and one, I don't want to go into too great detail here, but in order to get on the ballot to run for governor, you need to get 800 valid signatures of registered voters or eligible voters. And so generally, if you're going to do that, if you're going to submit signatures on petitions, you want to give the state at least 1,200 or 1,300 signatures overall, so that you don't get challenged. Well, one of the people who was in the primary, I'm not going to name her, she submitted 1,900 signatures, but 1,600 of them were of names were from people whose last names began with either an A or a B. How can
What a
you
coincidence.
Yeah, I mean, how do you walk down a street or on the boardwalk or, stand outside of a flea market or a farmer's market and people coming at you randomly? You'll have 16 out of 19 with the last names that begin with either one of two letters. It's just not possible. So she was knocked off the ballot for potential fraud. I don't know if the state's going to investigate any further, but she was knocked off. And then another person was knocked off the ballot because he was a Democrat in name only, he had a lot of people who signed his petition who were Republicans, and he's um, a regular, a perennial, like perennial candidate. He probably should have run on the Republican side, and they knocked him off for that reason.
Right.
So
Let's get to this though.
yeah, now there are four, as of today, there are still four independent candidates for New Jersey governor. In full disclosure, I'm one of them. We'll find out on Monday if all of our signatures, all of the four candidates, whether they withstood challenges or if any challenges were made at all. But we found out during this process that if we wanted to qualify to participate in the debates, back as we were just talking about in the Democratic and Republican Party primaries, two of the Republican Party candidates didn't qualify to participate because not even they raised the $490,000 needed. $490,000 needed to automatically participate. You and I both know that's just about $500,000.
That's
And if
ridiculous.
yeah,
To my knowledge, the most I've seen an independent candidate raise in a governor race that I've noted is 1999, the Jesse Ventura race, and that was only 350,000 he was able to put together as an independent. Couldn't make it to 490.
well, and he also had the advantage at some point of being in the debates.
He did.
And once he got into the publicly televised debates, not only was he able to raise more money, but his popularity increased, and that's one main reason why he won the governorship that year.
Exactly, but they've taken precautions since then to make sure that you can no longer make it into the debates. It was literally really very close. To my knowledge, they started taking these precautions after Ross Perot made it into the presidential debate and after
Right.
Jesse Ventura made it into the gubernatorial debate. They started taking these precautions.
Yeah, and then when I did run for governor in 1997, and there was still a high threshold, but I don't remember what it
I'm
was
assuming
now.
it wasn't as high as it is now.
No, it was something like 50,000 or 42,000. It was in the middle of, the tens of thousands. It was not hundreds of thousands. It was not six figures. And one of my opponents in that year, a libertarian candidate, actually met the threshold.
And he made it into the debate, didn't he?
Yes, and he made the debate. And ever since that time, the amount of money, just like with Jesse Ventura, the amount of money needed to qualify went up and up and up and up and up. Now, in New Jersey and everywhere, there are political ways of trying to get in the debates. But as we've been seeing and talking about all night, those with the money are the ones who are able to sort of set the rules. And if you don't raise enough money and you're not in the debates, there's nobody going to be weeping over
They always take these precautions. I don't know if everybody remembers the main race, Lisa Savage. She made it into two of the debates. By the third debate, they had made sure that she wouldn't make it into that one. I'm sure they're going to be taking precautions for the next election in 6 years to make sure an independent or third party candidate does not make it into those debates.
Yeah, the system is rigged, that's for sure. It's rigged for the elites and the rich. And as we've noted all night long.
You got to make sure, because each of these circumstances that we've identified, the bar gets moved. I can even go further. There was the Jill Stein, Gary Johnson lawsuit of 2016,
Right.
where both of them had gotten above 15% in the polling and had technically made it on, technically allowed to be in the debate. Oh, I'm sorry, but no.
Well, and I know Jill Stein is still fighting the FEC on some of that. So those legal actions those actions and then legal actions taken against her and other third-party candidates, they continue to have repercussions. And it's when somebody says, well, you have great ideas. Oh, the real Green New Deal sounds wonderful, but how many people do you have in the state's legislature? And you have to say 0. To some that sounds like you have no political power. To others, that's an indication about how much the system is rigged. And
Well, the other thing is, what people don't realize is if a third party candidate made it into the governor's seat, it's very possible they would have to make alliances. A Green, for example, would have to make alliances with the more left wing Democrats within the state legislature in order to get anything passed.
correct.
It's very likely that's the only way that would happen. You can't say,
No.
oh, well, there's no one there. Well, what about, let's look at the individual state legislators' ideologies. Oh, this one is left of center. Maybe I could get them to vote on A, B, and C. People don't consider that in their factoring of things.
Yeah, and the other side of this equation comes back to the protest movement, and how many people are dissatisfied with what's currently going on, and how many people are out in the streets. In the United States, we saw lots of people out in the streets at the height of the pandemic. After Memorial Day last year, when George Floyd was murdered in the streets. People have been coming out despite the pandemic, and it needs to continue. That's the public protest. And this would be a good time to go to the next slide to talk about ways people can help out. This is going back to the Colombia issue and also to Palestine. We've spoken about Palestine before as well. Change.org. There's a petition named SOS Colombia, which is to defund Colombia's militarization and fund pandemic relief instead. It is really important that the whole world look at what's going on in Colombia. And I think it becomes harder and harder to ignore when people continue to go out into the streets day after day, week after week, and they're showing videos of police brutality or police violence. As I mentioned, the couple of human rights commissions just this week issued reports of all of the violations that have occurred since April 28th. Not that they weren't happening before, because they were, but they've intensified since April 28th. So please consider going to change.org and the SOS Colombia petition to show that you care, you are concerned about the repression and suppression of the people's right to protest in Colombia, and also just the people's right to exist, violation of human rights. Then the second,
turn our attention to the chat for a second. We have someone actually commenting on this. We have Holly Horn, who says, Haiti too, eyes on Peru.
Oh, yes. Yes. That's another part of this situation. Peru, the president who was just recently elected in Peru is not a neoliberal, defeated the US-backed neoliberal. So perhaps that's another indicator that that people in Latin America are again pushing for change. And this is not the first time in the last 10 years, but it's another wave. It's another wave, and hopefully.
And they also mentioned Haiti as well.
Yeah, Haiti is another issue that I've been working on, or that I've been aware of, where the United States is backing a dictator who won't step down. He was supposed to, his term was by constitution was Jovenel Moise. His term was supposed to end at the beginning of February. Here it is, the middle of June, and he's still in power. And the United States has said nothing, done nothing, and there's killings in the street and violence in the neighborhoods and general chaos in Haiti, all because the United States will not. It continues to back repressive governments. The United States backs Ivan Duque in Colombia. In the United States, backs and supports the government of Israel, whether it's going to be run by Netanyahu or the new coalition. It's not going to change right now. In fact, after the 11-day offensive against Gaza that just ended about a week or two ago, Israel is asking for another $1 billion from the United States, on top of the $3.8 billion that's already committed to Israel. And so you can go to this website that's listed here, ampalestine.salsalabs.org, and sign a petition against the United States sending out yet another $1 billion of our taxpayer money to continue this repression. So
we put the petition in the chat for everybody, and you guys can click on that and you can use that. You can sign it.
Please do. Please help. I mean, the people are rising up all over the world right now, and the more we can join them and be part of this, the more we can combat, the super rich and the super elite that have made decisions that are not in our best interest.
All right. I think that was our last story.
Yes.
Thanks everyone for tuning in today. We'll update the video later and put the links in the description as well. For now, the links are in the chat. We'll make sure we update the video and put the links in the description though. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Goodbye.